Jesus Christ and Donald Trump can be compared with each other. Let's look at Jesus and Donald Trump. Now, this is not a section looking at the evangelical Christian support of Donald Trump. It's rather using Donald Trump and his way of communicating as an example, an illustration to look at Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, of course, an important figure. Donald Trump, at the moment, a very important figure in world politics. Jesus Christ, perhaps the most important, striking, world-changing public figure that there's ever been. But we can make a comparison by looking at their methods of communication. There are many ways in which Donald Trump is almost entirely dissimilar to Jesus Christ. Whilst recognising that, let's have a look at Donald Trump and his recent speech at the United Nations. The last speech of the previous president, President Obama, to the United Nations, could be characterised as something of an apology for Americans' past belligerence and an offering to restrict the actions of the United States and saying that other powerful nations needed to do the same. Just being willing to defend itself, but not being too overbearing was the theme. Now, sounds reasonable, but of course, during his tenure, we saw the rise of ISIS, the Islamic State, so-called, which is producing so much terrorism around the world. We saw Iran manage to inveigle a deal with the United States, getting lots of money, but still going on with its nuclear program. And we saw North Korea becoming more and more belligerent, to the point where they're now testing, it seems, this president of the United States to see if he is as weak in policy as the previous one. So here we have Donald Trump at the United Nations. How is he going to speak? Well, I've just got a very brief clip, so just going to tee that up now. It's only a few seconds long, but it has the relevant bit of Trump's speech. In this speech, you'll listen to how he communicates with the North Korean representatives who are sitting on the front row in the United Nations meeting as Trump is speaking, almost like they're trying to intimidate him. It didn't work, but it does have those sort of periods that they may be trying to do that. They were there right in the front row. Donald Trump is speaking, and he speaks very specifically about North Korea and about Kim Jong-un, the leader. Now, just a bit of background before I play the clip. To make sure you're up to speed, you will know Kim Jong-un, he's North Korean, and so he has that particular shape and cast to the features. But he's also extremely overweight, and yet wears sort of a military-style costume, a bit like a jumpsuit. Maybe something you'd see a spaceman wear underneath his astronaut outfit. Maybe something an off-duty Elvis impersonator would wear, that sort of thing. And he has been blasting off torpedoes, testing atomic weapons, showing some belligerence, being threatening to the neighbours and allies of the United States. So how is President Trump going to respond to this? Well, in just these few seconds, just listen to how he responds and how he characterises Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. Just see what you think of this. I'm going to make a comment on it, and then we move on to Jesus. Here is Donald Trump at the United Nations.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
Rocket Man. So he's been characterising him as Rocket Man, which, look, just before we look at the ramifications of it, is funny. I mean, that's a funny comment, comparing him to Rocket Man. He looks a bit funny, like he's trying to be a rocket man and he's sending rockets. It sort of diminishes him. Now, remains to be seen whether this is an effective policy, ridiculing this man. Uh, is is it going to have the effect of diminishing him in the eyes of others? Is it going to enable the President of the United States to exert a power of threat over him such that he doesn't have to actually use the military power that he talks about there? I don't know, and it'd be more than interesting to see. These are difficult and interesting times, and we continue to pray that there will be a peaceful outcome. But just looking at the way that Donald Trump expressed himself, now let's compare him with Jesus. How did Jesus, meek and mild, how did he express himself? Here is Jesus talking to some teachers of the law and Pharisees, respected people. This quote takes from Matthew 23, verse 27. This is what he says. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. Not exactly nice and polite. Now here, what Jesus was doing was he's pointing out that looking good on the outside, like a whitewashed tomb. It's a tomb, so it's for keeping dead bodies in, but you've made it look nice and smart, giving it a coat of paint. But inside, of course, like a tomb's meant to be, it has bones, it has death inside. It's all dead inside. Now he's comparing the teachers of the law to this, in that they were lording it over others. They were looking good, maybe. They were certainly wanted to be shown to be good. And they would accept the best places at dinners and accept the sort of kudos that comes with it. Do I mean that? Yeah, the sort of the social standing that came with their position. They're very happy with it in general. And Jesus is criticizing them for this, saying that they're whitewashed tombs. He could have been more conciliatory, could have worked with them to try and persuade them. He could have, dressed like them, acted like them, and gradually tried to persuade them to change. He chose to insult them and characterize them in an outlandish, figurative way as being dead on the inside, but shiny and white on the outside. Now, that's the way he chose to do it. Jesus was an effective communicator. As I say, he is perhaps one of the most effective communicators, and certainly I would say that he has transformed the world more than any other public figure. When we look at how Christianity has been behind the development of the Western world, yes, it's been also been down to the ancient Greek philosophers and down to the sort of accidents of history. A lot of the Western world developed, to be English speaking, but almost exclusively, and the ways of law, etc., come from the Britain of the Middle Ages. That's where they developed from. But through all that, there is Christian thought. There are the thoughts of Jesus Christ, who expressed himself in such a pithy way that they would never be forgotten. Jesus Christ was certainly rude sometimes. Now I'm just going to take a look at another passage. Just remember, we're comparing him to Donald Trump. Now Donald Trump calls someone Rocket Man. Jesus Christ compares people to whitewashed tombs. I think that's the same order of insult, of caricature. It's the same order of caricature. Now, whether or not Donald Trump should have done it, that's not the point that I'm trying to make here. What I'm trying to say is that it's sometimes not good to be nice. In fact, sometimes you have to be not nice in order to be good. And Jesus Christ illustrates this. Does Donald Trump? Well, I'll come back to you on that. But Donald Trump's pithy use of language when he was in the primaries going through to get the nomination for the Republican Party to go to the election to become president, he used various insults against other people, most memorably against Jeb Bush, who he saw as being low energy, and characterizing him as low energy just was so accurate, it seemed, that it just seemed to wipe him out of any chance that he had. And maybe his characterization of his opponent in the election, Hillary Clinton, as being crooked Hillary, maybe that had the similar effect. This use of caricature can be extremely effective. But because it's so effective, it's like a weapon, or a really effective weapon, like the nuclear weapons that the great powers have, and also North Korea appears to have. They're effective, so they need to be used carefully and wisely. Now, here I said I'd give you a little reading from the Bible, showing Jesus speaking with Pharisees again, some of his opponents close to him in belief, except for they left out the grace and generosity of God. They emphasized the rule keeping. And he says this is Jesus at a meal with the Pharisees. He's sitting down with them, eating their food, and he says, "Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God 1/10 of your mint, rue, and all the other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogue and the greetings in the marketplaces." Well, how does this apply to us today? Well, I want to apply it to church leaders mainly. We church leaders, I'm a vicar of 2 churches in the northwest of England, can put on our robes and make an appearance of being above other people. We, of course, know inside that we are not, that we are sinners like everyone else, forgiven by the grace of God. That's a temptation we can fall into, receiving the accolades that come from being the person in the robes, or let me put it this way, taking the authority for granted that comes with the robes. Or you could be tempted in another style of church, another churchmanship, to accept money. Maybe it's sort of a church within the prosperity gospel tradition. You can end up lording it over other people, taking their money and assuming or enjoying the material benefits at the expense of others. Now, this is not having a dig at any style of churchmanship. It's something to watch out for. Church leaders must especially watch out that they are not whitewashed tombs, and they must use language carefully. Yes, use pithy language where needed, not always being nice, not always angling for authority like apparently Boris Johnson does, but sometimes using the techniques that Donald Trump and Jesus Christ himself used, but using them wisely, using them to get across the point of the Christian message that matters most, that God loves each and every person and wants to meet them at their point of need so that they can be part of the great purposes of God in the world. That's the point of meeting together at worship.
1521